Hello and welcome to the next episode of DDR, the podcast all about your favorite Drow, Drizzt Do'Urden. My name is Justin, and in this episode, we'll be diving deep into part 5, that is the last part of Book 2, Exile, and it is titled Spirit, discussing all of our favorite plot points, characters, and more.
And my name is Jeffrey, the other half of this Drow-tastic duo in the darkness. Except if you're watching on YouTube, because, well, I mean, we use cameras, so it's got to be lit. That would make our show lit.
Nice.
See, I can do slang. I can be hip. Speaking of hip and cool, we love Dungeons and Dragons, so we're gonna take some pieces from this part and see how they relate.
Speaking of hip, man, my hip's been hurting today, Jeffrey.
Oh, thanks for making us sound old, buddy. It's like, I think a storm's a brewing.
Following along with the show is easy. Just grab a copy of the book, read the next part of the book. Man, I almost said chapter again. And tune in every week. But remember, we want to hear your thoughts too. Share your dim lights with us at drizztdoneright@gmail.com.
You're going to get it done by the time we start the next book. Easy peasy,
I know, right?
buddy.
Hopefully.
Or, better yet, be part of the ongoing discussion on our very own Drizzt Done Right Discord. The Discord invitation, it's linked in the podcast with the description right in there. So if you raise an interesting point, we're going to bring you up on the show. And even though you've missed a chance to get a shout out during this book, don't worry. We're going to be rolling right on through into the next book like a freight train. So grab a ticket, stay on the ride inside of our Discord channel so you don't miss any important stops along the way. Justin, how are you feeling about the end of this book?
I am pretty wrecked after finishing this book, Jeffrey. I'm not going to lie.
The first book was great. I'm not sure how I'd compare book 1 and book 2. I like them both very much.
Oh yeah.
I couldn't really tell you which one's better, but boy, the emotional ending to this one was a bit. It was something.
I mean, it's been a long time since I read this book. If I actually ever finished it, I don't know that I ever did. After reading this, I was pretty surprised. So either I forgot it all, or this is my first time actually finishing it. But yeah, I'm a little wrecked after it.
Well, we are here for you.
So, it's been a week since our last episode aired, but Jeffrey, it's only been 5 minutes since we last recorded part 4. So.
Feels like it was just a few moments ago.
But so we're double recording here, so not too much has changed within the past 5 minutes for me, Jeffrey. I'm just looking forward to a nice big bowl of chili after we're done here.
Nice. I've got some cold pizza in the fridge. You can reheat it. I think cold pizza is for champions.
Cold pizza. No, that hits its own spot. Very different spot.
Now Elizabeth will not eat cold pizza. She's like, it's
really?
disgusting. Yep. I tried to tell her. I was like, I gotta love it. It's got its own. You're right. It's got its own little place on the food calendar.
Totally. Yeah.
Love it.
Now, Sarah is entering a chili competition, so we needed to do a practice run here.
How hot did she go? Like on a
not
heat
too
scale?
hot. No, it's
excellent.
It's maybe in the 5 range out of 1 to 10.
That's not bad. As I say, a lot of times you want to step it down a little because you're going for that flavor, that bite instead of because you're doing a contest instead of just
Right. Like if it was me eating this chili, I would want it to be hotter, but I'm like, okay, I know not everyone is into that.
Right.
Like, I mean, if you're at a chili competition, you would think that you would be into some spicy food, but
there's a difference, right? Because that's that level. When you take it to a 9, it's tough for everybody.
But we got real beef in there. Like we got like steak in there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and along with some pork sausage, and oh man, it's really good.
Now, do you have a meat grinder?
I don't have a meat grinder.
This is something I think I will eventually get because I've been watching people butcher down their own pieces, and you take the stuff that you don't use, the scraps, you put it in with your burger, you grind it up, you use the excess fat to give yourself a burger out of the chuck. And
interesting.
It just seems like I could find reasons to have a meat grinder.
Do you have a KitchenAid? There's got to be a a meat grinder attachment on the KitchenAid.
I have one of those, really stupidly expensive mixer things. That might be what you mean, the KitchenAid.
I think that, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
basically
it probably
what it
has
is.
an attachment, but I feel like Elizabeth would really give me a side eye if I started putting like sausage, kind of
come on.
sausage through the mixer that she has.
Awesome. All right, well, here we are in part 5, finishing up book 2. Let's go ahead and get things started off with the insight check. The insight check. Now we're going to roll an insight check to investigate the inner monologue of Drizzt. It opens up with, "Spirit cannot be broken or stolen away." Drizzt discusses how the mind, body, and heart of a physical being is what gives a being spirit. Something that Zaknafein currently still has all 3 of. ... He then goes on to talk about how tyrants come along and try to break the spirit of those that serve them.
Does he technically have a heart, though? Because they sacrificed that.
Well, I mean, I would think it's still in there, right? Just
but
maybe
they cut it out. So
they pulled it.
Did they
no,
burn
that
it?
was
Did they eat
that,
it? Like
they didn't take his heart out. I thought they took.
No, see, that was when she was gonna do Risen, is what you're thinking, when he was drugged, but then they sidestepped and then killed Matron Sinife, the house member of Do'Urden, formerly known as Matron Sinife. But back when they killed Zach, remember when Vierna was tying him up and they were having a conversation? They took his heart.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
Did they? Put
I don't know if they
during
removed it, but they might have stabbed it because they had the special spider-like dagger that they
actually
used and
pulls
everything.
it out.
Yeah.
Right. Well, then his insight check totally falls apart.
I mean,
and like
well, maybe not. You know what? Forget I asked. Go ahead.
So yeah, tyrants come along and they try to break the spirit of those that serve them, trying to get them to bend to their will, but always they fail. For destroying any one of those 3 parts of the spirit results in death, like removing someone's heart, right? So what good is a kingdom of corpses to a tyrant? But then, where was Zaknafein, right? Where was he during the 10 years of Drizzt's solitude? If he does still have all those 3 things, which apparently he might not have a heart, but
2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Where was he during the encounter in the Mind Flayer's den? Drizzt then repeats, "Spirit cannot be broken and it cannot be taken away. This I must believe." So maybe Drizzt was just kind of like holding on to that hope in hopes that his, dad was coming back. But I mean, but he does think that the spirit of Zaknafein still exists within whatever creature he fought within part 4. He knows that the creature being the body of Zak, it must still have some good in him. It must still have at least a portion of the spirit of Zak in him. So he's going to need to surrender to his father and be taken directly to the Emperor. From there, perhaps the rest of the party can infiltrate the Death Star and bring the Empire to its knees. Are we back on Star Wars again, Jeffrey?
Now, that was not planned how we ended up in there on both parts, especially since we're doing a back-to-back recording, but I find that hilarious.
That is really funny. So, yeah, at this point, finishing this letter at the beginning of the part, we don't know what Drizzt's next actions are going to be, right? So, yeah, we're going to have to jump into the Drizzt and see. The Drizzt, it's the part of the show where we take a look at the next part of the book and we give you the Drizzt of it. Chapter 22 is titled Without Distraction. And we start out in the perspective of Zaknafein, still within the Mind Flayer compound. Zaknafein was continuing his way out, trying to follow Drizzt's scent, and the Mind Flayers just allowed him to leave.
See you later.
All but one, of course. One of them, his pride got into his head a little bit, and Zaknafein cut him down very easily. He was now in hot pursuit of Drizzt and had one major advantage over Drizzt. Zack does not need to rest. Meanwhile, Drizzt, Belwar, and Clacker continued to run away from the Illithid cave. The group happened upon a group of Duergar, Grey Dwarves. Drizzt was hopeful that they could ally with them, but their response to allying with a Hookar and a Deep Gnome proved otherwise. A rock came hurtling toward Drizzt, but it wasn't unexpected. Quickly, Drizzt cast Fairy Fire on all of them before they went invisible. So, I mean, like, their invisibility didn't really do too much for them.
No, that is such a cool visual when you picture like a from a Final Fantasy standpoint, like when you stack up to fight, like your party and their party, and all of a sudden like 2 or 3 of them just like laugh and go out of sight. Now they're still outlined by the fire, but they disappear. I was like, that is such a cool ability.
That is cool. Drizzt evened the playing field by casting darkness over himself and at least 2 of the Grey Dwarves, one of which surrendered after the other one was stabbed through the mouth by Drizzt's scimitar, which I loved that. That was almost my dim light, because like he managed to just barely, or he managed to stab the one and he yelled out in pain, and then Drizzt just followed the sound right to the dwarf's mouth, you know?
Shades of Zachnafane, maybe, like snatching out the matron tongue with the
totally,
the dark,
yeah. So Drizzt led his prisoner out of the darkness, only for Clacker to execute the prisoner. In fact, Clacker seemed to turn full Hookar on the group, killing the rest of the Grey Dwarves and then attacking Belwar and Drizzt. Drizzt made his way up Clacker's massive armored body. I believe he was prone at the time, but he made his way up, eventually reaching his throat and slipping his scimitar between the plate-like armor. "Do it," Clacker mumbled, but Drizzt would not kill Clacker. Clacker angrily stood up and stomped down the tunnel, which is like in the Underdark, like stomping, probably not a great thing to do, but whatever.
I mean, he is huge.
Drizzt began to realize if he was going to save Clacker, he was gonna have to find a wizard to prevent this permanent transformation. He was gonna have to go back to Menzoberranzan. Belwar was not on board with this. Just like, what are we gonna offer in exchange for dispelling Clacker's curse? Like, he's just the most sarcastic thing, you know, right? And Drizzt replied, "The wizard's life," which I thought that was really cool. It's just like mic drop. Right, exactly.
Yes. Jinx. Absolutely. I felt like that was, when I read it, it like went off like a gong in my head. It's like, well, what are we gonna offer him? It's like, just with, like, you know, it was like this deathly stoic, icy stare.
Totally.
His life. It's like, oh, yep, okay, you're totally right. We're gonna offer him his life, because that's Drizzt, bro. He's gonna cut people. He just stabbed right through the mouth.
Yeah, he's ready to go. I feel like the hunter said that, you know?
Oh, that's good. Yes.
Then we move into chapter 3, titled Ripples. So back in Menzoberranzan, Matron Banray was consoling Matron Malice, encouraging her that Zincarla will not fail. It never has in the past. Malice, however, was not so sure. She was feeling particularly vulnerable during this time. She was afraid that another house would see this vulnerability, right? This vulnerability in House Do'Urden. House Do'Urden is now on the ruling council. They're outside the favor of Lolth. She's heavily distracted by Zincarla. She was just afraid that some lesser house was going to strike. So Banray offered 200 of, quote, her own soldiers. Surely no one would attack the Do'Urdens when there were 200 of House Banray soldiers there, right? So Malice was escorted home, and Jarlaxle walked in and sat down next to Matron Banray.
You're going to find out that Jarlaxle has clones everywhere.
Yeah,
that's how he's everywhere,
right?
Yeah.
And he asks Matron Banray, will she succeed? Not even Lolth knows the answer to that, Banray responded. Jarlaxle then asks a question that has been on my mind for a while. Why doesn't Lolth kill Drizzt? Banray then answers Her answer was a little surprising to me. Since Drizzt has fully forsaken Lolth, she has no power over him. Jeffrey, what do you make of that response?
I'm not really sure, because I think part of it is Lolth is not physically in this realm, right?
Okay.
I mean, obviously she's an entity, she can come in, but up until this point in the story, she's not here, right? So she's not going to run over and stab him with a sword. So she would use her gifts or the removal of her gifts as she does to Matron Malice and most of the other people. But since he's just completely severed that connection, wants none of her gifts, well, she can't take anything away because she's not giving him anything. So it's almost like, not that she has a blind spot to him, but almost like he has shielded himself by cutting off all kinds of like hooks and tethers that should be there from him being raised and indoctrinated along the way.
So then, like, if she is able to come to the material plane to kill Drizzt, at what point would she do that? You know what I mean?
It would have to imaginably be a huge offense. Now, in the story so far, we know that he did not kill an elf.
Right. Is that the biggest offense?
I'm not sure that she's going to leave the safety, because she's a god thing. I mean, she's a god or goddess of those realms, unless prodded properly, because she's not really in any danger where she's at right now. She's further removed, but she can send minions all day long. You know what I mean? So for her to actually like get up off of her duff, right, her little tush, and go do something, it would have to take something. You would like move mountains, you would think.
Yeah. Right.
A little bit more than not killing an elf on a surface rate.
Yeah, like the way I look at it, as far as that response goes.
Otherwise, she would just have a constant presence in Menzo Barons and walking around slashing and smashing everything.
That's true. Yeah, like when I read that response, I was just kind of like, okay, so Lolth seems to be given her power by her followers in a way. Mm-hmm. At least the way that I first interpreted that. Yes, that also makes sense
too. I like that.
And so it's just kind of like, okay, if they all just simply left her with that reasoning, she would be powerless. I don't know, like, what kind of goddess is that, right? I don't know. Like, anyway.
Well, no, I mean, it's neat. If I forget what D&D book it was, it might have just been not like an official textbook, but it might have been a book. And it talked about like when gods are no longer prayed to or followed, they have no followers for a long period of time, they can become not distant, but like they don't have power. So what gives a god its power is the people that pay faith, that have the temples, and they somehow draw their...
Just like influencers.
Yes! No, wait. We do have a support this podcast link, people. It is in the episode description.
Anyway, Matron Banray eventually had a little moment remembering the other two times she witnessed Zincarla through successful completion. She couldn't forget Zincarla's success as she looked at her own house. She also couldn't forget the heavy price she paid whenever she looked upon her reflection. What did she do, Jeffrey?
Well,
what did she do?
She spent a lot of time sucked into focusing on Zincarla until she was an emaciated form. It's essentially what happened to Malice. Like, Malice is losing all of her,
right.
She's like, oh, I'm going to look like Matron Banray. How true she was in the last
exactly.
Except
exactly.
Not only did Banray use it once, she double dipped. She did twice.
Oh, I thought maybe like she did the one and like someone else that she knew did the other.
I don't think that's how it's worded. In my opinion, when I read that, I read it as she saw it through to completion twice.
Right. So like, but what did she do? Like, she sees... I seem to remember her saying something like she saw her reflection of her mother in herself or something like that.
I don't know.
Or like when she sees her reflection, she's like reminded of everything she did. She's reminded of something along the lines of her mother. Shoot, I forget now. But like my first thought was like, did she zombify her mother? And like,
Oh, I wouldn't
but
put it
why?
past because it's got to be something. Because I mean, she ascended to the first house of Menzo Barons
Right.
for
Yeah.
quite some time now.
Now, see, like, so up until this point, I thought that she was in the first house, or her house made it to the first place, whatever you want to call it, because of the Mind Flayer.
Right.
All right, that's what I was thinking the whole time. But now it's like, no, she used Incarla to get up there, and like you were saying, probably even twice. Yeah. So anyway, Malice, on her way back to the Do'Urden compound, smiled smugly as they walked past, or she levitated past, the 9th house of Menzo Baranzan. She was wishing to know what their matron mother was thinking as the 8th house walked by with 200 soldiers from House Banray in tow. Dinan was not as comforted by the soldiers. He could only think of that night battling House Hanet when Jarlaxle used his whistle.
I believe this is the part in the book where they say the one soldier winked at him.
Yes! Yes!
I was like, what? And it's like, again,
Right.
I love how he slips these little things in when we come to completion of the chapter and everything else. You'll understand exactly what happened. But at this point in the book, here comes this soldier, and Dina's just like, wait a minute, this seems familiar. And the one soldier just looks at him and is like, winks at him, like, hold on, man, stop it right there. What?
All right, going into chapter 24, titled Faith, Drizzt and company decided that Clacker's best chance of survival was to take him to Menzo Baranzan. All right, Drizzt got Belwar on board. So they began their journey back. And they were approaching a familiar green glow, the cavern with acid and Corbies.
Those funny little flightless bird guys. Yeah.
I was thinking, like, they're in the Underdark. The Underdark is huge. Couldn't they have found a different way around? But there was no sign of Corbies, so no big deal, right? They made their way across the cavern, but just as Clacker disappeared through the archway on the other side, there came a loud shriek. A moment later, Zaknafane emerged from where Clacker just disappeared to, right? Drizzt yelled for Belwar to tend to Clacker, saying, "This is Zaknafane, my father," to which Drizzt saw a moment of hesitation in Zak's step. By the time Belwar made it to Clacker, it was obvious to him that Clacker was, he was going to die. Which was like, when I heard that, I was like, or read that, I was just like, no. But
yeah, I was right there with Belwar. Like, again, I've read this book itself at least 3 times, I think. And so, but still, to get to the part where that happened, I was like, I know this happens, and I'm still over there, like, poleaxed in the emotions when it's like, oh my God, Clacker just went to the car. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Zombies that, Clacker.
Yeah. Yep. And so I'm just like, okay, no, that's okay. They can revive him. There's Revivify.
I was in my head the whole time. Like, so he goes back to Menzo Barons, and I have read these books, and I'm still following along. And like, okay, so they go to Menzo Barons, and what are they going to do? They're going to find a wizard. They're going to threaten his life. This is going to be cool. How does he get around Matron Malice? Like,
yeah.
Just because I was just following along with the story, and it pulled me right back in.
Yep. Belwar was, he could barely take the sight of it. Like, he was about to just turn around and go help Drizzt fight Zak. But against that judgment, he decided to stay and comfort Clacker and watch as the Hookar reverted back to Petch form just as death was reached. And that was another description that was almost my dim light. I was just like, oh, man, that wrecked me, Jeffrey. It really surprised me, that whole thing. And, oh, man, I was really disappointed. But, I mean, in the end, it was just kind of like, yeah, I mean, it's the end of the book. People are going to die. It's going to be a thing. But, oh, well.
Way to make me care about the character enough that it hurts when he dies.
I know, right? Drizzt, now facing Zak, started interrogating. "Who are you?" Zak replied, "I am your mother." I was like, hold on. But Drizzt knew that his father was inside the Wraith.
He said, Drizzt, I am your mother.
Darn it. Missed that one. So they started fighting back and forth, and when Zak used the double thrust low on Drizzt replied the way that he always did, with the cross down parry, but now with his own flavor. This boot above his sword's hilts toward Zack's face. Something that only Zack has ever witnessed, right? He only used it one other time on Zack, and yet the Wraith was ready for it. All right? Matron Malice would not have known to dodge that.
Right.
So obviously Zack was still in there. Zack's hands stuttered at Drizzt acknowledging that the Wraith was Zack. Matron Malice fought to maintain control. Drizzt started a new plan. Fight Zack Nafane like old times. Go through the familiar series of attacks, including some banter that would encourage his father to come out. Zack Nafane finally got Drizzt in a position ready to kill the Drow, but Belwar's screams of "Drizzt!" caused the hesitation within the Wraith. Drizzt managed to stand back up, taking a huge chance that his father had taken control of his body. Drizzt sheathed his scimitars. In that moment, I was just like, no! Like, what are you doing? But I mean, he knew
he's
what he
about
was
to
doing.
get Kylo Ren right there. When Han
no.
came in.
Oh, no.
Yep.
Man, we have so many Star Wars references.
I never realized how closely this book parallels.
On Malice's end, she gave the order to kill Drizzt, but was met with only darkness. She needed to give more and more of Zack's consciousness back to the Wraith in order to defeat Drizzt, and now, I mean, she gave too much of Zack back. He was able to take his body back. And another moment that was almost my dim light. The two had the briefest of moments where they got to actually talk to each other and converse. And, most of it was unfortunately Zack just like warning Drizzt about what was going on. But Drizzt's hopes were high that the two were together again and would stay that way. But again, he described that he was under the control of Malice. He would never stop hunting Drizzt, or she would never stop hunting Drizzt as long as Zack was alive. And then Malice just started to regain control, but Zack had just enough control left that he vaulted himself from the walkway down into the lake of acid.
We lost Zack twice.
I know, right? We just lost Clacker and Zack.
Yep.
In the same chapter. Zack for the second time. Did we lose someone else? We didn't lose anyone else. For some reason, I thought there were 3 major deaths in one chapter.
I'm not sure that anybody
That's going to be the
died
next
as far
chapter,
as,
right?
Yeah.
So,
I don't think anybody died back in the first
previously.
book that we would remember as far as like his companions at all, right? Like people he was friends with. He lost Zack.
That was the only one, I think.
Yeah.
No, that was the only one. So we just lost Zack and Clacker. Yeah, in one chapter. And now we move on to chapter 25, Consequences. Malice was both infuriated and terrified as she lost contact with Zack Nafane. And that's when Drizzt took over House Do'Urden. Because Drizzt took out her snake whip and literally whipped Malice to death. Insane.
There's a lot of bludgeoning in this book. You know, the basilisk, the ogre, the now Malice.
Yeah, crazy. Perhaps Drizzt will be a stronger matron than Malice was, so, good for her, right? Deanan rushes in the room and acknowledged Drizzt as matron. Drizzt could, she's like, I could get used to this, right? But then Deanan revealed his purpose for the visit. They're currently being attacked by House Banray.
Wait, what?
Banray, right?
No, Banray gave them the troops so they wouldn't get attacked, right?
Well, that's the thing. They gave them the troops so that they could more easily attack.
Oh, no. So you think that wink meant that, and the Jarlaxle whistle. Oh, see, there's all these threads are tying together.
Yep. Insane.
And she just let them walk on in completely blinded by the pageantry.
In.
Yep.
She invited them in.
The pomp and ceremony, because as she was having that as she was being escorted back, she was like, "What is so and so thinking of this?"
Yeah, exactly. She's not thinking about what she should be thinking about.
Right.
She's
And,
inviting the traders in, you know?
absolutely. And she just essentially not excuses Breeze's actions, but justifies them. Like she brought the downfall on. She opened the door, let the people in. She's not even paying attention.
Yep, totally. Maya and Vierna are out on the balcony when they realize that the forces outside the gates that they're looking at were the same house emblems as the 200 inside the gates. Maya fell to several darts, while Vierna was taken out by her own snake whip. As far as whether or not they're dead, we're not sure. I know later on Jarlaxle says something along the lines of like, Vierna's probably fine. But Maya, I don't know. So it's obvious that Lolth wanted House Do'Urden eradicated because the snake whip was allowed to attack Vierna, right? Same thing when Breeza used the snake whip on Malice. Like,
yep.
Malice is sitting there just like, yeah, that's not going to work. And then like, yeah, it worked.
The snake whip is a gift from Lolth, and it will not, it's literally like programmed not to attack matron mothers. Except it does.
It did.
So you know that Lolth is like, ha, 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 gotcha. Like the same way when Malice swerves and stabs, former Cinephae there.
Right. Yep.
She's like, yeah, goodness, I just put Breeza and Vierna together. Brierna. Breeza reaches back and Malice is like, not gonna work. It's like,
right.
But it is.
But it's too late. Breeza then left the throne room, and Dinan stood there watching the eyes of Malice when Jarlaxle came in. Dinan assumed he was there to kill him, but Jarlaxle had other plans. He invited Dinan into the mercenary clan of Bregandierth.
I love that part because Dinan's
so cool.
All right, man, it is what it is. I get it. Yep. I'm a house noble. Take the head. Just make it quick. That's all I want. Just make it quick. And Jarlaxle's like, no, or... And you're like, wait a minute, what do you mean, or?
There is no or. Like, I'm a noble. Like, if I stay alive, then I'm a witness against the attack, and that's not going to work. And he said, it'll be fine.
he's like, to what end? Like, what do you get to gain? And it's like,
right.
If you think back to when Bay and Ray gave Cinephae into House Do'Urden, she's like, look, this has been done time and time again. Like, this is how we roll. And essentially, by taking Dinan into the brotherless, what is it called? The brothers without clan, Bregandierth, the not having a house, makes sense. Absolutely makes sense.
Oh, totally does.
And Jarlaxle is so clever that he's like, look, Dinan, good swordsman. He's subservient. He's going to kowtow when I need him to. He's not going to try to I know when he's going to try to overthrow me. So that makes it likely he's never going to overthrow me. It's like, man, he's good.
Yeah. So the attack finishes. I'm sure House Do'Urden is eradicated. Okay. I don't know that it ever actually went into that, but we're now a few days later. Jarlaxle is talking to Dinan about their next bounty, Drizzt Do'Urden. This poor guy just cannot get a break. Like, even after the ruin of House Do'Urden, Lolth has a massive bounty on Drizzt's head. But Dinan, however, refused. He refused to take on the task. He already knows, he's convinced that he would experience just as much death and disgrace at the hands of Drizzt that he would at Jarlaxle. So he's just like, nah, I'm not going to do it. I know what I'm capable of. I can't, so I'm not going to. And Jarlaxle is oddly okay with it. He's just like, okay, I respect
He uses
that.
it to gauge Dinan's responses or whatever. But it's like, I found it really, really cool from Dinan's part that he's like, wait, all right, kill me. He's like, we're not going to kill you. We're going to give you life. He's like, oh, I have hope. He goes, yep. Now let's kill your brother. He goes, you know what? Just kill me. No. He's like, I refuse to do it. There's no way. And I was like, again, this is not a very Drow thing to do. You know what I mean? They usually follow orders and everything. So to see these Drow now starting to come apart at the seams makes you wonder.
Yep. Yeah, totally. Into chapter 26, Lights in the Ceiling. That is the last chapter of the book. And Drizzt peered down into the acid where Zaknafein fell. He reflected on his past experiences with the hunter inside him. Though the hunter had taken over Drizzt's body before, Drizzt still existed within. The same could be said about Zak, so Drizzt thought, right? Though the Wraith took over, Zaknafein still existed within him. His spirit still existed on, because the heart was in there, Jeffrey.
His heart will go on. Yeah, I feel it.
Drizzt and Belwar gave Clacker a proper burial by dropping the corpse into a belly of the belly of the acid lake, right? Mm-hmm. But I mean, that's better than being in one of the bellies of the creatures of the Underdark, right?
Yeah, you don't want to leave your friend to scavengers.
Yeah. So they made their way back to Blingdenstone, which I was like, hey, that's a good idea. Like, right? Like, that's a great idea. So that's where they went back to Blingdenstone. Drizzt was going to live happily ever after there, right? So Drizzt was left in Belwar's cottage, while Belwar went to the king to give the news on the zombie Drow's second death. And Drizzt, left to his own thoughts, and without the knowledge of Malice's demise, continued to wonder if this was such a good idea. He knew that Malice wouldn't stop until either she or Drizzt were dead. All right. Belwar then returned with a grimace. Not the Burger King grimace. Or McDonald's grimace. I'm getting them mixed up.
Burger King doesn't have a grimace.
No, they don't. King Schnicktick would allow Drizzt 10 day in Blingdenstone, but then he would need to leave. Drizzt was okay with this. He already knew what was coming, right? He already knew.
He expected it.
And he already came to this new conclusion that he would then venture to the surface in search of his new home. Which, yeah, I was like, all right, let's go. I didn't realize. Well, I'll keep going through this. Belwar tried to convince the Drow that he would stay by his side, but Drizzt wouldn't hear of it. Belwar then gave Drizzt, he eventually accepted it and gave Drizzt a light-emitting brooch and instructions to never forget him. But then after the 10 days, within those 10 days, Belwar took Drizzt to a store and bought him a bunch of supplies that he would need to make it to the surface. He also gifted Drizzt with maps of the Underdark that would lead him to the surface. Like, how cool is that? And then Drizzt felt a lightning I missed a section here. Drizzt left Blingdenstone and made his way toward the surface. It took him, I don't think it described it exactly, but it was described earlier that it would take him many 10 days to get up there. But we cut up to that moment when Drizzt is wandering through the corridors of the Underdark and he feels the air start to get lighter. He calls out Guinevere so that the two can enter the surface world together. Which,
that's almost exactly how we left the first book, right? When you leave the first book, they're on the edge of Menzoberranzan, right? And they're in the tunnels. They're standing there and they're looking out at their next adventure.
Yeah.
And then we get to book 2, and we're literally, again, at the end of it, and they're standing there at the end of this tunnel, getting ready to go to their next adventure to the surface. And now they can see the light.
What's the third book gonna be?
And that's probably where we go to Icewind Dale.
All right. So that's the Drizzt. Let's go ahead and talk about our favorite parts of this part in the dim light reel.
The dim light is where we cast darkness on our favorite parts from this week, and dim light, all of our favorite characters, events, descriptions, and more. So for me, my dim light is the fall of Malice. It's spread out a little bit, and I really liked how you went through, because I'm going to only take one side. I'm just going to bear with me. But I thought that watching her spiral was just the best part of this part to me.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So we pick up at chapter 24, and Malice has been worn down by Zenkarla and the constant attention to the spirit wraith. But suddenly her eyes widen as she utters a sound so primal that her daughters immediately knew the wraith had found Drizzt. Briza looks at her sisters and dismisses them. Just kind of gives them a look. Gotta go. Vierna hesitates, but then Briza drops a hand to her weapon, almost like a samurai pulling the sword a little bit, like, you want to go? And so then she leaves. This leaves Briza alone, standing behind Malice, staring intently as Malice intently stared at Zaknafein. Now, the foreshadowing of that image, you could have made that the cover of the book and it would have given away everything, right? I mean, it's such a powerful image of her coveting the throne, moving behind Malice, and Malice is just too infatuated with the spirit as it hunts her son.
Yeah.
So then Briza watched her mother's every movement with the clenched fists that are pounding on the arms of her stone throne, even after they begun to bleed. Malice was feeling the ecstasy of the hunt, Zincarla coming to its conclusion. She had hoped that it would be like this, that her final moment of triumph would shine clearly in her thoughts from across the miles. She had heard every word that Drizzt had uttered to his father's corpse and felt his distress so very keenly. Never had Malice known such pleasure. And then she felt a slight twinge as Zack struggled against her control, but she pushed him aside with a guttural snarl as Briza watched with more than a passing interest. Now, this may seem a little disjointed because, again, I only really want to focus on the roller coaster ride that Matron Malice is going through in this part. So there's a whole fight and chase scene that Justin did earlier with going through the dim light. But since we've all read that, I just wanted to give Matron Malice a close-up look and feature her side of this. No, Malice screamed and violently tore control of her monster back, walking the delicate and dangerous line between Zaknafane's physical abilities and the consciousness of the being that he had once been. "You are mine, Wraith," Malice bellowed, "and by the will of Lolth, you shall complete this task." This is significant, right? We know that Zaknafane is on the other side of this connection, struggling to take control. Drizzt is over there, pleading with him during the fight, and he's trying to jump into the driver's seat. Earlier, Malice just swatted him aside, but this time she has to forcibly grab the wheel, so to speak. And meanwhile, Briza is in the room with her like a panther. Right? Not like Guinevere, but like a panther. We know that she's hungry for a higher station, as all Drow are. But we know she is more savage than most. We know that she hungers for the throne, but Matron Malice has ruled over the family with an iron fist. Now, with Malice having been so depleted from her time spent focusing on Zincarla, she's actually starting to lose control of that. Lolth has given her this highest of gifts, and Malice is suddenly having a tough time. Perhaps a sign of weakness? "Kill him!" Malice squealed in glee, thinking that the moment of victory at hand. Except, suddenly she doesn't see the battle. She only sees darkness. Zaknafane has grabbed control from her, and she looked around stunned and saw her too curious daughter. And then she sank back within the trance, fighting to regain control. Briza is all too curious. Malice surfaces from the bond and she doesn't think anything of it, but it's interesting that R.A. Salvatore takes a moment to mention that Briza is all too curious. Just like a panther, perhaps, that sees an opportunity for an easy meal. He didn't say that she's pacing around with anticipation, but that's kind of the feeling that I get. Malice has lost control of her gift and gone back to try to avoid failure. So Matron Malice could not even scream her denial. 1,000 explosions pounded her brain when Zaknafane went into that acid lake. 1,000 realizations of impending and unavoidable disaster. At this moment, she kind of jumps up and flails at the air as if she could grab onto something. She's uttering primal sounds, and through it all, though, clearly hears the hiss of the small, wicked, snaked heads of a high priestess's whip, with Briza behind her. "I had hoped that my time of ascension would be many years away. But you are weak, Malice. Too weak to hold House Do'Urden together in the trials that will follow your failure." Now here, Malice wanted to laugh because the whip was a weapon of the Spider Queen, and it could not be used against matron mothers. But she couldn't bring herself to do it for some reason, and then suddenly she was just mesmerized as Briza's arm slowly reared back and then shot forward. 6 snake heads uncoiled toward her. This is impossible. It went against all the tenets of Lolth's doctrine. The fanged heads came on eagerly and dived into Malice's flesh, with all of the Spider Queen's fury behind them. Searing agony coursed through Malice's body. She teetered on the brink of consciousness. The snake whip snapped again, and the floor swallowed Malice. Briza swung again and again and again, venting her fury. Now, I've read the last part of the passage pretty much word for word because she, being Malice, was ultimate villain of both of these books. I mean, she has literally haunted Drizzt's nightmares and waking moments for his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly, she's fallen. Like, what will this mean for Drizzt? What would this mean for Menzo Berenson? It's like a giant object has been removed, and I'm curious to see how that void is filled. I mean, one thing's for sure, right? She got a really amazing send-off. Like, Salvatore built that up wonderfully.
Oh, yeah, totally. It reminded me a lot of, I don't know if you've ever watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, the TV show.
Yes.
Okay, the last season with the sister that becomes Fire Lord. What's her face? I forget her name. She becomes the Fire Lord, and then she just descends into madness.
Yeah.
From just like all the power, she like gets rid of everyone and everything, and yeah, it just goes crazy. Yeah, like Malice was doing a lot of that as well. Slightly different situation, but still just reminded me a lot of that. So no, that's really cool. And yeah, you did a lot of reading word for word. I am literally going to read my dim light word for word because I can't do any better than that. Like, right. It was amazing. So yeah, my dim light this week has dim light written all over it. Because it was the moment that Drizzt and Guinevere first reached the surface in the night. And like I said, I just have to read it. So they came into a small cave, and the darkness beyond the distant archway was not nearly as gloomy as the darkness behind them. Drizzt held his breath and let Guinevere out. The stars twinkled through the broken clouds of the night sky. The moon's silvery light slayed out in a duller glow behind one large cloud, and the wind howled a mountain song. Drizzt was high up in the realms, perched on the side of a tall mountain in the midst of a mighty range. He minded not at all the bite of the breeze, but stood very still for a long time and watched the meandering clouds pass him on their slow aerial trek to the moon. Guinevere stood beside him, unjudging, and Drizzt knew the panther always would. And like I said, I love that
little pause at the end. It kind of sinks it home. You're right.
Oh, totally. Yeah, like that's one reason why I like to listen to the audiobook while I read. Because hearing it is different than reading it.
For sure.
And then if you hit a moment like that, you can just pause it. But here, you didn't need to pause it. It was the literal last words of the book. And it was just like stopped. And you just sit there for like 5 seconds afterwards. And it's just like, oh, like such good writing. So like I said, I can't really add to this. It was just such a beautiful moment. It was filled with wonder and hope as Drizzt viewed the night sky for now the second time, right? Are the dangers that he left behind, are they still a concern? What future does the surface hold for Drizzt and Guinevere? It was just such an amazing moment. And but I also have one other question. What is Drizzt going to do when the sun comes up? Just that first time where he sees the sun rise. Yeah. What is he going to do?
I mean, panic so a little, excited.
Right? Right. He has to.
At least a little trepidation.
Right. So I am so excited to get into book 3 and see what happens here. But
nice.
We still have a dungeon delve to get to. So Jeffrey, you can go ahead and take that away.
So, the Dungeon Delve is the part of the show where we link this week's reading with our favorite tabletop role-playing game. So for me, I went with Animate Dead. I know it's not quite Zin Carla, but I wanted to look at the mechanic of animating the corpse. And, maybe some ways that they could prove problematic to fight. So this spell creates an undead servant. It requires a pile of bones or a corpse of medium or small humanoid within range. Your spell imbues the target with a foul mimicry of life, raising it as an undead creature. The target becomes a skeleton if you choose bones, or a zombie if you choose a corpse. Since Zachnafane was a zombie, we're going to go with those stats. They're given an armor class of 8. Their hit points are 3d8 plus 9. They get a speed of 20, plus 1 to strength, -2 to dex, plus 3 to constitution, -4 to intelligence, -2 wisdom, -3 charisma. They're immune to poison. They get dark vision to 60 feet and a passive perception of 8. They understand all languages that it spoke in life but can't speak.
Gotcha. You said all languages. Like, whoa.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting, right? Because you can tell right away that it's not really going to work for Zachnafane, because he was definitely agile and fast. He was far harder to hit than an 8 AC.
Right.
And he also didn't seem to have any HP. Or, I mean, maybe, and this is where I thought it was cool.
He had like an infinite amount, right?
Or he had an immunity to non-magical weapons.
Oh,
Maybe something like that, because he wasn't fazed by anything other than the acid at the end, right?
Right.
Now, on each of your turns, you can use a bonus action to mentally command any creature that you made with this spell, as long as it's within 60 feet. If you control multiple creatures, you can command any or all of them if you choose. If you don't give it a command, the creature only defends itself against hostile creatures. Once an order is given, the creature follows it until the task is complete. The creature is under your control for 24 hours. Now, in order to maintain control of the creature for another 24 hours, you must cast this spell again on the creature before the current 24-hour period ends. The spell would then reassert your control over up to 4 creatures that you made with the spell instead of animating new ones, right? Now, this actually lines up pretty well with the book when you think about how Matron Malice was continually locked in and focused on Zachnafane during Zincarla. And she had to keep focused in order to control his actions. She had to renew it every day. So she's always there and locked in order to keep control of Zachnafane. Now, it seems, from a homebrew point of view, that she kind of gave Zachnaphane's consciousness just a little bit of control in order for him to execute orders and commands more efficiently. Right? When we talk about him fighting and everything else.
Yeah.
She wouldn't know how to sword fight like he did, so maybe she gives him 10% or 15% control in order to get through the parts that she's unfamiliar with. And somewhere along the line, she gave up too much control and perhaps, failed to cast the spell again before the time ran out. From a gameplay standpoint, maybe she was too exhausted to remember how much time had passed. Zachnafane took control for a moment and then, whoops, swan dives into the acid.
That was kind of lucky that they didn't take a different route, I guess. Because the acid was there. Like, what would they have done otherwise, right?
Yeah.
Like you were saying.
Well, then he'd have been forced to maybe use fire or something to kill. But I mean, would Drizzt have been able to bring himself to... He couldn't. He put the... You know what I mean? So it's like, would he have been able to dispatch of Zac?
Right. Yeah, I don't know. No, that's a really good... dungeon delve there. Animate dead. I didn't think about that. Like, when you first said it, I was like, yeah, it's Zincarla. It's not animate dead. But, I mean...
Now, Zincarla maybe is like that to the 10th power, right? Because it doesn't have a 60-foot range. It goes miles.
Right. And
some
all
of the
those
small
stats.
things, right? Yeah, the stats would be a little different because he's not just a zombie. So it's like, maybe that it allows you to choose a I don't know, just you'd have to homebrew that, I think. Just a little bit to tweak it around in order to get it to work. But I found it neat that most of the bones are really there. Bones?
Right. Awesome. Okay. My dim light.
Say it loud, say it proud.
Maps! In the last chapter of the book, Drizzt was given a bunch of maps of the Underdark that would ultimately help him get to the surface, right? Maps were yet another thing that really got me hooked in D&D. One thing I love about an open world video game like Elder Scrolls games or the newest Zelda games are the empty maps that you start with at the beginning of the game. And then as you go through the game, you get all these little icons, all these little bits of the map filled in. And it's just so satisfying to me. Each location that you discover, it's your story. It's unique to you. And, perhaps other people are playing, a bunch of other people are playing this game as well. But they might hold a different weight to you. They make your own unique story. So perhaps when you showed up to this specific cave over here, whatever it is, you showed up fully loaded and ready to delve into that cave. You were in an exploring mentality.
Okay.
Perhaps another person that approached that cave fled there, fleeing some huge monster, and they were looking for shelter. And they quickly ran in there for refuge, and they were not ready for whatever lurks down there. Perhaps you accidentally stumbled upon it, upon like a secret entrance or something, and you wound up going through that cave without... like everyone approaches those locations in a different way. Oh, yeah. Even if it's geographically speaking. Maybe one person came from the north, one from the...
It's as simple as like going back to the first Zelda game, like, what's your favorite castle? There's 9 of them, right? So your location and mine are going to be different. I liked going through the desert in order to find the graveyard where you get the white sword, move to go. Everybody's going to have a different way, a different play that they play it, and be like, you know what? I hate that place over there with sandworms, always a pain in my backside. And other people are going to be like, I love it. Everybody has different things. That's what makes it great, right?
Yeah. So I just love how maps also just give a way to help visualize your story. As you're looking at a map, you can say like, oh, well, that's where we started. And then we made our way over to there. And then we went up there and then over there and then back home. And like so on and so forth. So yeah, love maps. So as you know, Jeffrey, and as most of our listeners know, I created our current campaign that we play from scratch. Okay. Yep. And guess where I started? I started with a map. So I'm not saying that this is the only way to start constructing a campaign, but I will say that it really helped me. It helped me with visualizing where our adventurers would be able to go. It helped with establishing relationships between cities, as well as establishing a, quote, somewhat rich history of the world. I created a little bit of history, but it's a pretty young world, so it's not too crazy. But as far as the rest of the details go, I mean, you can add that in as the group plays. As you add locations to the map, just like in the video game, you're creating your own personal story that is unique to your group. Like Jeffrey, no one else is ever going to go to a small, unnamed, ruined village in the suburbs of the city of Scalamere to fight a puppet master orc named Rothru.
Much to Ryan's dismay, no one will ever visit Don Maldir.
No one else. You guys did.
Right. You're right. We finally got there.
But yeah, no one else will go to Don Maldir but you guys and experience what you guys did there. Well, one of the things you did was fought a Bahir down there. That was crazy.
Yeah.
But that's something that is unique to our group. And I don't know, there's just something really cool about that,
Absolutely.
And it all came from me making the original overworld map. I was almost going to say, it's from me making this map. But I don't want to take that credit, you know what I mean? You guys also made the map. Because you guys decided where you were going. And then I started filling in the details. You guys started exploring the whole overworld. And from there, you guys ultimately made the map what it is. So, and hey, you don't have to be the most artistic person in the world to make your own map. I'm not a very artistic person at all. What I did when I first decided I wanted to sketch a map or make a map was I sketched it in a notebook a few different times. Each time I made a new draft, I made a couple edits here and there and thought about like how this city would interact with that city. Well, this city's more in the mines, so they're more in the mountains, so they're going to be a more mining community. This one's over near a bunch of grasslands, so they're going to be more of a farming community. And how do they relate to each other and things like that. Eventually, I did want to make a digital version of this. So one afternoon I sat down and I sketched it on my laptop. And there it sat for a few years until our group started playing. I don't know if I ever told you, Jeffrey, I had that map drawn out, I think back in 2018.
Oh, wow.
The original map.
Yeah.
And we didn't start playing our campaign until 2021. We started playing D&D in 2020, but I didn't get that campaign going until 2021. Like, it sat around for a good 3 years. Oh, wow. So yeah, I mean, sometimes that happens, but it was well worth it. We play on it all the time now. Battle maps, on the other hand, that's something I haven't really ventured into making. They're easy enough to find online that I'm just like, yeah, I could just grab one of those and fit it to my campaign. And it's, I know there's a lot of people out there as well that you can support on like Patreon, and they'll make your map specifically for you. You can tell them what you want and they'll make it for you. I haven't tried that either. If anyone has a specific battle map maker in mind that wants to share it with me or with the rest of the group, jump on the Discord, post a link, let us hear them, because, I've gotten a lot of free maps that have been out there and starting to run out. I'm starting to run out of good ones. So I feel like it's going to have to happen eventually. But hey,
what?
That's the end of my dungeon delve.
No, what does that mean?
And I think that's the end of book 2 here, Jeffrey. That's the end of season 2, I should say.
It is.
So yeah, that's going to do it for Exile. Thank you everyone for listening. Remember that if you like the show, give us a 5-star rating. Also, make sure you're getting the most out of this podcast. Pick up a copy of book 3, and start reading it. We're going to get to that as quickly as possible here. If you don't have time to read, try the audiobook. Then you can listen during your commute, at work, the gym, wherever. And don't forget to email us your dim lights at drizztdoneright@gmail.com, or log on to the Discord and join in on the discussion there. Remember, we would love to hear from you.
Wow. So book 2 is in the can, and it's a wrap, huh?
I guess.
Yeah. I definitely like the pace.
I was expecting a little bit of a pun going on there. I was like,
no, I
don't want to walk right into this.
I definitely like the pace of going through the book. You all have made these months so entertaining for us. I know we've had a blast making it together. And knowing that we have you out there to share it with, that's just so cool and special. I'm looking forward to book 3 and completing our first trilogy. We're going to continue to tweak the format just a little bit. We're going to give you that episode 0 that we had talked about for the book before we dive in and tear it apart, like Guinevere on a central brain. Maybe a little less splurting. If you'd like to support this podcast, we do have a link that's in the episode description. Not to be too redundant, but it says support this podcast. So, yeah. I love little wordplay. Anyhow, you can click on that link, send $1 or $2. You can send whatever you'd like. We just hope that you'll join us on the next episode. We'll be here when you press play. But until then, farewell, friends. Play fair and be well.